60 years, the Western was the dominant pop culture genre in the United States. But starting in the 1970s, it got a heavy reappraisal. It was tough to gloss over the inherent problems with the genre, that the Western expansion that it glorified was really harmful. So by 1991, Westerns were all but gone. In fact, 1992 would see the release of Unforgiven, which really kicked the revisionist Western into high gear. Western Kids leans into the classical Western. Kind of. It looks like it's based on the Westerns of the 50s, but if you're looking closely, the character you're playing is as murderous of anti-hero as you'd find in any spaghetti Western of the 60s. You're playing a fresh-off-the-train stranger arriving at a town on the frontier. After being told that it's dangerous to go alone and take this, you start just going around stabbing people, and this qualifies you to be a bounty hunter. So your goal is to take out 7 bounties, and thus become the sheriff. You can do the first 6 bounties in any order, although there is an order that's more effective than others. Some of the stages have permanent power-ups, and collecting those early will make your life so much easier. But let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Western Kids is, shockingly, not a terrible depiction of Native Americans. I'm not going to call it good, and I'm assuming that someone who is well-versed in the cultures of the peoples that were living on the plains at the time would find more fault with it than I can. But it's not bad. The depiction of Native Americans in Western Kids just makes them people. Yeah, there's a lot of them that are hostile to you, but they're not all over the game as a basic enemy. There's plenty of Native Americans who are just living their lives, sometimes as friendly NPCs, and sometimes as people who are just walking around minding their own business until you walk up and stab them for money. And that's something you do to everybody who decide to step outside during this game. And if you choose to play 2 players, the second player is a Native American, who unfortunately has his own group of stereotyped power-ups, but you can't have everything. I feel like the Native Americans in Western Kids are just depicted as people. And given how poor the representation was in video games at that point, this is a welcome improvement. The Mexicans, on the other hand, are all drunks who stop to chug from their tequila bottles every 5 steps. So, every bounty target is its own stage, and you're given a time limit for all of them. Generally 20 minutes, although there is one that is significantly shorter. Western Kids plays a lot like the Ganbare Goemon series. You've got a bit of an angled perspective, and you can explore these huge areas looking for keys, power-ups, and other things that will help you. You collect money by defeating enemies or smashing some objects, and can then go buy some equipment in shops. And there are alternate ways to make money. While you're exploring, B attacks and A jumps. If you picked up any additional weapons, hitting select will rotate through those. You're given that knife at the start, and it is such a terrible weapon to use that I really recommend going after the second bounty first, because there's a gun right there at the start. Using the knife is a miserable experience, and the reason for that is that the hitboxes in Western Kids are terrible. Did someone get 1 pixel onto your shadow? They'll take a point of damage. And you're so close to the edge of the screen as you're walking that enemies will spawn in right there. And since you're both walking toward each other, it almost guarantees that you're going to get hit. There's a similar problem with this minecart sequence where the path constantly forks, and one side will be a dead end, but you can't see the dead end until 17 frames before you have to switch. That's right, I counted them. That's less than 0.3 seconds. Now I have pretty good reflexes honed by playing way too many of these games, but I'm also scanning 2 different paths to see which one will be the dead end, and that time frame is already pushing the limits. You're given 3 lives in Western Kids, and as many continues as you like, although after your first continue, it sends you back to the start of the stage when you get a game over. And these bosses will ask you to join them, and if you choose to do so, or are mashing through their dialogue boxes, then it's an instant game over with no continue. Around town, you'll find shops that will sell you useful items. A map will display the overworld for you, while a ladder will instantly teleport you back to the start of a dungeon area. Both of these are accessed by pressing start and hitting A. You can buy food to restore some of your health, and if the shopkeeper only has one item of food, you might have to exit and re-enter to refill your health. The effects of food go to both players, so at least you have that benefit. Keys are used to unlock doors that you'll find, which you typically need to do to progress the quest. You can often find keys lying around in the dungeon areas, but sometimes you'll just have to buy one. Meat refills your health to full when you run out of life, and the jacket prevents you from taking damage when you get hit, though it wears off after an absolutely enormous number of blows. The hat does the same thing as the jacket, but for attacks from falling objects, like birds or rocks. Besides getting things from the shop, there's items that you can find in the barrels that are scattered around. You could find a money bag with lots of cash, a sheriff's star, which if you collect 5 of will extend your health bar, or a skull, which will damage you. The dungeons that you find as you explore will switch the game's perspective. You could be playing from more of an overhead view, able to scroll the screen up and down, or it could become more of a platformer where you have gravity and have to jump from point to point. There are 3 kinds of money-making games that you'll find. The strength test requires that you stop the meter, and your goal is to get the bar to stop at the indicated point, not to hit it as hard as you can. Blackjack is, well, blackjack, and at the shooting gallery you just want to shoot all of the cowboys. It runs on a time limit, and if you clear 80% of them, you're given a chance for an extra difficult mode where you could win even more money. The last important structure that you'll find around towns are hotels, where you can choose what quality of room you want to stay in, and then recover an amount of health. If you pay for the high-end room, you get some cowboy nudity. There's a lot of awkward platforming in Western Kids. Your jump is really awkward, and you have a strange amount of control over it. Pushing in another direction will send you flying, and as a result, precision jumping is just about impossible to do. That doesn't stop them from requiring it, though. And it doesn't help that the problems with the screen scrolling are made worse by the jumping. You'll try to jump over a hole and somebody will spawn where you need to land. Or you'll jump over a hole and land in a hole that wasn't on screen when you jumped. The best tip I have for Western Kids is that there can only be 2 enemies on screen at any given time. They'll spawn infinitely, but there can only be 2. So you could use that to your advantage when you're trying to make progress. Once you've cleared the initial 6 bounties, the final one will become available, and from that point on, you can no longer continue. You've only got one shot at it. The comments I could find from Japanese Famicom fans about Western Kids were mainly pointing out that it was a second-tier Goemon game. Some flagged it as a bad game, others seem to be fond of it. And I really wish I liked Western Kids. There's good ideas here. 6 mini-adventures? Yeah, sure, sounds great. Power-ups associated with some of them? Okay, maybe you should have had a power-up on every stage. The real issues, though, are that the movement is terrible, and that makes the bad hitboxes even worse. Seriously, it's almost impossible to avoid attacks in this game, just because you seem to be the most fragile cowboy out there. I've got to put this down as decent concept, really bad execution.